My fiancé said, "I've never loved anyone the way I love you." I'd just found the 3 other women he sent the exact same message to. I was at my fiancé Simon's apartment, his MacBook open in front of me, looking at flower arrangements for our engagement party that was supposed to happen in 2 weeks. And then a notification popped up in the corner of the screen. The message preview said it was from someone saved as Baby Girl 2, and the text read, "When are you coming over tonight? I miss you." I just stared at it. My brain didn't want to process what I was seeing because there had to be some explanation, right? Maybe it was a wrong number thing, or a joke, or something that made sense in a way I just wasn't getting. But my hand was already moving toward the trackpad, and before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked on the message. The thread opened up and I saw months of conversations. Months. Photos of Simon with another woman, smiling the same smile he gave me, holding her the same way he held me. And the words, God, the words were the same. You're my forever. I've never felt this way about anyone. I can't wait to build a life with you. Every single thing he'd whispered to me in the dark, every promise he made about our future, was right there on the screen, copy and pasted to someone else. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely scroll, but I kept going, kept reading, kept finding message after message that proved everything I believed was a lie. He called her his angel. He called me his angel too. He told her she was the only one who really understood him. He said the exact same thing to me last week. I felt like I was going to throw up, but I couldn't stop. I went back to his message list and saw other threads, other names, and I clicked on another one. This woman was saved as my queen, and the conversation was just as long, just as detailed, just as full of the same promises and pet names and plans for a future that apparently he was offering to everyone. She thought she was his only one. She was talking about meeting his family, about the apartment they were going to get together, about the ring he'd shown her pictures of. A ring. He showed her a ring. I checked the dates, and some of these messages were from the same days he was texting me, telling me he loved me, asking about our wedding plans. How did he keep track of all of this? How did he remember which lies he told to which woman? I found a third thread, this one from someone just labeled with a heart emoji, and it was the same thing all over again. Same sweet words, same future promises, same, "You're the only one for me" garbage that I had believed with my whole heart. 3 women, 3 separate lives he was living, and none of us knew about the others. I looked around his apartment and suddenly everything felt different. The framed photo of us on his nightstand, the one where we're laughing at the beach, it wasn't sweet anymore. It was evidence. The candles he said he bought because they reminded him of me, I bet he had the same ones at whoever else's place he visited. The drawer where I kept a few of my things, I wondered if there were drawers like that everywhere, little pieces of women scattered across the city who all thought they were special. I felt so stupid. I felt so completely, totally stupid for not seeing any of this. Were there signs I missed? Red flags I ignored because I wanted so badly to believe he was real? I thought about all the times he was working late, or visiting his mom, or at the gym for a few extra hours, and I just believed him. Why wouldn't I? He had no reason to lie to me. Except apparently he had every reason. Because lying was just what he did. It was who he was. I sat there for I don't know how long, just staring at the screen, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to call him right then, and scream at him until my voice gave out. Part of me wanted to throw his laptop against the wall and break everything in his apartment and make him feel even a tiny bit of the hurt I was feeling. But another part of me, the part that had learned to think before acting, that part knew I needed more. I needed to understand how deep this went. I needed to know who these women were, and how long this had been going on, and whether he'd done this before. So I did the only thing that made sense. I took screenshots. Every message, every photo, every lying promise he made to every woman he was playing. I sent them all to my own phone, one after another, building a file of proof that he couldn't deny or explain away. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my hands were still shaking, but I made myself keep going until I had everything. Then I cleared my search history, closed all the tabs, and put the laptop back exactly where I found it. Screen angled the same way, browser open to the same flower website I'd been on before everything fell apart. I stood up and looked around his apartment one more time, the place where I'd felt so safe, so loved, so sure of my future. Now it just felt like a trap I'd finally escaped. I grabbed my purse and walked out, closing the door behind me like nothing had happened. He would come home later and have no idea that I knew. He would text me goodnight and call me his angel, and I would have to pretend everything was fine. Because I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed to find out who these other women were. I needed to see if they knew about each other, about me, about any of this. And I needed to figure out how to make sure that when I finally exposed him, he wouldn't be able to talk his way out of it like I knew he would try to do. Simon was good at lying. He'd proven that. But I was about to get very good at finding the truth. So after discovering Simon's triple life, I knew I couldn't just scream at him and watch him spin another perfect lie. I started reaching out to the other women, one by one, using fake accounts at first to feel them out. Simon thought he was so clever, keeping us all in separate corners of his life, but he never considered we might actually talk to each other. The engagement party was in 2 weeks, and I had a different kind of celebration planned. I couldn't wait to see which lie he'd try when all his worlds collided. Stay tuned for when his only ones finally meet. The first woman I reached out to was Angelina, the one Simon had saved as Baby Girl 2 in his phone. I created a fake social media account and found her through the photos Simon had in their message thread, matching her face to a profile that was public enough for me to send her a message. I kept it simple at first, just saying I had some information about Simon that she might want to know. Her response came back fast, and it was exactly what I expected. "Who is this?" she wrote. "And why are you messaging me about my boyfriend?" I told her my name was Muriel and that I was engaged to Simon, and I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear about 5 times before her reply finally came through. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," she wrote, "but Simon would never cheat on me. We've been together for over a year and he just gave me a ring last month. Look." And then she sent me a photo of her hand with a diamond ring on her finger, the kind of ring that says, "I'm serious about you," without being a full engagement ring. My chest got tight looking at it because I had a ring too, a bigger one, the one Simon put on my finger when he asked me to marry him. I typed back, "I'm not playing any games. I have proof." She responded with, "Proof of what? That you're some crazy ex who can't let go? Simon warned me about people like you." That stung, knowing that Simon had already planted seeds to make me look like the problem. But I wasn't going to let her dismiss me that easily. I started sending screenshots. The first one was a message Simon sent me on the same day he apparently gave her that ring, telling me I was his whole world and he couldn't wait to spend forever with me. Then I sent another one, a photo he took of us kissing that he'd sent me with the caption, "My angel." Then another message where he used the exact same words he'd used in his conversations with her, word for word, like he had a script he just copied and pasted. The typing dots appeared again. They stayed there for a long time. Then they disappeared. I waited, staring at my phone, wondering if she was going to block me or call me names or just pretend she never saw any of it. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I was about to give up when her message finally came through. "I think we need to talk," she wrote. "In person. Can you meet tomorrow?" I felt something shift inside me. Not quite relief, but something close to it. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Someone else was finally seeing what I had seen. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day, somewhere public, somewhere neither of us had ever been with Simon. I showed up early and grabbed a table in the back corner where we could talk without anyone listening in. When Angelina walked through the door, I recognized her right away from the photos, but she looked different in person. Smaller somehow. More fragile. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying, and she was holding a folder stuffed with papers that she clutched against her chest like a shield. She spotted me and walked over slowly, like every step hurt. "Muriel?" she asked, and I nodded. She sat down across from me and just stared for a moment, taking me in, probably comparing me to whatever Simon had told her about his crazy ex. Then she opened the folder and spread the papers across the table. "I printed everything," she said, her voice shaking. "Every message, every photo, every time he told me he loved me. I stayed up all night reading through it and matching it to what you sent me." I pulled out my own phone and opened my screenshots. For the next 3 hours, we sat there comparing lies. It was like putting together a puzzle where every piece was a different way Simon had hurt us. He told her he wanted to have kids with her. He told me the same thing. He said his favorite memory was the first time they danced together in her kitchen. He told me his favorite memory was the first time we danced together in my living room. Same story, different woman. He even used the same jokes, the same compliments, the same little romantic gestures that I thought were just for me. "He brought me flowers every Friday," Angelina said, her voice breaking. "Sunflowers because I told him they were my favorite. He brought me flowers every Friday too," I said. "Roses because he said they reminded him of me." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when you're trying not to scream. We compared timelines and realized that some of his business trips were actually trips to see her, and some of his family emergencies were excuses to spend weekends at her place while I thought he was taking care of his sick mom. His sick mom, who I had met, by the way, and who was perfectly healthy and had no idea her son was living 3 different lives. Halfway through our conversation, Angelina got quiet and stared down at her coffee cup. "There's something else," she said. "Something I didn't tell you in my messages." I waited, giving her space to say whatever she needed to say. A few months ago, I was at Simon's place and his phone buzzed on the table. I wasn't trying to snoop, but I saw the preview. It was from someone saved as My Forever, and the message said something like, "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby." My whole body went cold. "What did he say when you asked about it?" "He said it was a wrong number," Angelina said. "Some guy who kept texting the wrong person and he hadn't gotten around to blocking them yet. He laughed about it, made a joke about how this random person must really miss their girlfriend. And I believed him. I actually believed him. A third woman. There was a third woman out there who thought Simon was hers, just like we did. Someone else he was lying to, making promises to, using the same recycled words and gestures that he'd used on us. Do you know who she is? I asked. Angelina shook her head. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Why would I? He was so convincing, so sweet about the whole thing. But now I can't stop thinking about it. How many of us are there? How many women has he done this to? I thought about the message threads I'd seen on his laptop. 3 that I found. But who knew how many he'd deleted? How many women he'd already used up and thrown away before moving on to the next one? Simon wasn't just a cheater. He was something worse. He was someone who collected people, who fed on their trust and their love and their belief that they were special. And he did it over and over again without feeling anything at all. Angelina wiped her eyes with her napkin and looked at me with something new in her expression. The sadness was still there, but underneath it was something harder. Something angry. I want to help you, she said. Whatever you're planning to do, I want to be part of it. Are you sure? I asked. This could get messy. Simon's not going to just admit to everything and apologize. He's going to fight back, try to make us look crazy, tell everyone we're lying. I know, she said. He already tried that with you, warning me about his crazy ex. But now I know the truth. Now I've seen the proof with my own eyes, and I am not going to let him get away with this. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. I want to help you destroy him, she said, and her voice was steady now. All the tears dried up and replaced with something that looked a lot like determination. I squeezed her hand back and felt something I hadn't felt since I found those messages on Simon's laptop. Hope. Not the romantic kind of hope that Simon had sold me with his lies and his promises. This was different. This was the hope that comes from knowing you're not alone, that someone else sees what you see and believes what you believe and is willing to stand with you when everything falls apart. I had my first ally. Now we just needed to find the third woman and figure out how to bring Simon's whole world crashing down around him. The engagement party was still almost 2 weeks away, and I was starting to think it might turn into something very different than what Simon had planned. So after Angelina and I compared notes, we started doing detective work, going through Simon's social media likes and comments, looking for patterns, looking for the third woman. It took days of scrolling through his accounts, matching faces to interactions, but eventually we found her. She showed up in his likes on photos from a company page, and in the comments she called him her work bestie, in a way that felt a little too familiar. Simon was still texting me every night, still calling me his angel, still acting like everything was perfect between us, completely unaware that his house of cards was about to collapse. He thought he had us all fooled, each of us grateful for crumbs while he feasted on our trust. The engagement party invitations had already gone out to his family, his friends, everyone who believed he was this perfect, devoted man. I couldn't wait to give them all a real show. Next up was meeting the woman Simon swore was just his co-worker friend, and when we finally reached out to her through a private message, she was suspicious at first, just like Angelina had been. But something about the way we explained things must have gotten through to her, because she agreed to meet us at the same coffee shop where Angelina and I had our first conversation. Angelina and I got there early, sitting at our usual table in the back, going over what we were going to say and how we were going to break the news without making her run away before she heard the truth. What if she doesn't believe us? Angelina asked, picking at her napkin. What if Simon already got to her like he did with me? Then we show her the proof, I said. That's all we can do. Let the evidence speak for itself. We waited, watching the door, and when it finally opened and a woman walked in looking around nervously, I knew it was her. But then she turned to the side and my whole body went still because she was pregnant. Really, obviously pregnant, with a bump that looked like she was about 5 months along. I grabbed Angelina's arm and whispered, "Oh my God." Angelina followed my gaze and her face went pale. "No," she breathed. "Please tell me that's not her." But it was. The woman spotted us, recognized us from the descriptions we'd given her, and walked over slowly with one hand resting on her belly like she was protecting what was inside. She looked tired, the kind of tired that goes deeper than not getting enough sleep, and when she sat down across from us, I could see her hands were shaking. "You're Muriel?" she asked, looking at me. "And you're Angelina?" We both nodded, and for a moment nobody said anything. We just sat there, 3 women connected by the same man who had lied to all of us, except now the stakes felt so much higher than before. "How far along are you?" I finally asked, because I had to know. I had to understand what Simon had done. 5 months, she said, and her voice cracked on the words. "Simon and I are getting married next spring. Or at least, that's what he told me. That's what I thought was happening." She looked down at her belly, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "He said he wanted to wait until after the baby was born to have a big wedding. He said it would be more special that way, that we could include our child in the ceremony." I felt sick. Actually physically sick, like I might have to run to the bathroom and throw up. Simon had gotten this woman pregnant. He had promised her a wedding, a family, a future, all while he was engaged to me and dating Angelina, and who knew how many others before us. "I'm so sorry," I said, and I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything. I'm so sorry we have to show you this. I pulled out my phone and started showing her the screenshots. The same ones I'd shown Angelina. The proof of all Simon's lies laid out in messages and photos and promises he made to each of us. She looked at the screen and her face changed, going from confused to hurt, to something that looked like her whole world was falling apart right in front of her. No, she whispered. No, this can't be right. He said you were his crazy ex who wouldn't let go. He said you kept stalking him and making up stories because you couldn't accept that he'd moved on. She pointed at me, then at Angelina. And he said you were his unstable cousin who had mental problems and made up lies about him for attention. Angelina let out a bitter laugh. His cousin? He told you I was his cousin? He said you had issues, the woman continued, her voice getting higher and more frantic. He said your whole family knew you were troubled and he felt bad for you, but he had to keep his distance because you made things up. I watched her face as the truth started to sink in, as she compared what Simon had told her to what we were showing her, as she realized that everything she believed was built on lies. The tears that had been forming in her eyes started falling down her cheeks, and she covered her mouth with her hand like she was trying to hold in a scream. He told me he loved me, she cried. He said I was the only one. He said we were going to be a family. Angelina reached across the table and took her hand. He told us the same things, she said softly. The exact same words. He has a script and he just uses it over and over on different women. The woman, still crying, shook her head like she was trying to wake up from a bad dream. But the baby, she said. He was so happy about the baby. He cried when I told him I was pregnant. He held me and said it was the best news of his life. He's a good actor, I said, and the words tasted bitter in my mouth. That's how he gets away with all of this. He knows exactly what to say and how to say it so you believe every word. We sat with her while she cried, giving her tissues and water and whatever space she needed to process what we'd just destroyed. I thought about Simon, probably at work right now, texting all three of us sweet messages without knowing that his separate lives had just crashed together in this little coffee shop. After a while, the woman wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. There's something else, she said. Something about money. My ears perked up because I remembered Simon asking me for money a few months ago. Something about a business opportunity he couldn't pass up. I'd given him $5,000 without even thinking about it, because why wouldn't I trust my fiancé? He asked me to invest in his business, the woman continued. He said he was starting a company and needed funding to get it off the ground. I gave him $8,000 from my savings. Angelina's face went red. He asked me for the same thing. I gave him $6,000. My heart sank even lower, which I didn't think was possible. He got $5,000 from me, I said, for the same fake business. We all looked at each other, doing the math in our heads. Almost $20,000, stolen from 3 women who trusted him, for a company that didn't exist. But even as I thought about the money, I realized that wasn't what hurt the most. The money was nothing compared to the rings, the promises, the futures he'd dangled in front of each of us. The baby growing inside this woman's belly, conceived with a man who never had any intention of being a real father. This isn't about the money, I said, and both women nodded. This is about everything he took from us. Our time, our trust, our belief that we were special to someone. The woman took another shaky breath and said, Please don't use my name. I can't handle people knowing about this, not yet. Can you just call me by what I do? I'm a nurse. Just call me the nurse. Okay, I said. Whatever you need. The nurse looked at us with red, swollen eyes and said, There's one more thing. Something that doesn't make sense now that I know all this. She paused, collecting herself. Simon told me his whole family was dead. His parents, his brother, everyone. He said they died in a car accident when he was 20, and that's why he was so desperate to start a family of his own. He cried when he told me about it. I held him for hours while he talked about how alone he felt in the world. I stared at her, my mouth literally hanging open. His family is alive, I said. His mother is coming to our engagement party. I've met her probably a dozen times. I've had dinner with his brother and his brother's wife. They're all very much alive. The nurse's face went through about 5 different emotions in the span of 3 seconds. From confusion to disbelief to horror to rage to something that looked like complete emotional shutdown. He told me they were dead, she repeated, like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. He told me he had no one. He made me feel like I was going to be his first real family since the accident. There was no accident, Angelina said. His mom makes him pie every Sunday. I've seen the photos on his phone. The nurse put her head in her hands and just stayed there, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I looked at Angelina and we shared a moment of understanding that went beyond words. Simon wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't just a liar. He was something darker, something that invented dead relatives and fake tragedies to manipulate women into feeling sorry for him. What kind of person does that? What kind of person cries about imaginary dead parents to trick a pregnant woman into trusting him more? We stayed at that coffee shop for hours, the 3 of us, sharing our stories and finding more and more ways that Simon had used the same tricks on each of us. By the time we left, something had changed. We weren't just three victims anymore. We were something else. Something united. On the walk to our cars, I pulled out my phone. We should make a group chat, I said, so we can plan together without using those fake accounts I set up. We need to be able to reach each other fast if anything happens. The nurse nodded, still looking shell-shocked but stronger somehow. The engagement party, she said. That's where we do this, right? In front of everyone who believes his lies? 9 days away, Angelina confirmed, checking the calendar on her phone. That gives us time to get everything organized, make sure our evidence is solid, figure out exactly how we want to do this. I created the group chat and added both of them, naming it something innocent in case anyone saw our phones. We stood there in the parking lot, three women who had never met before Simon brought us together through his lies. And for the first time since I found those messages on his laptop, I felt like we might actually win this. Simon had no idea that his three separate lives were about to collide. He thought he was so smart, keeping us all in our own little boxes, feeding us just enough attention to keep us loyal. But he made one big mistake. He underestimated what would happen if we ever found each other. The engagement party was going to be very different from what he planned, and I couldn't wait to see his face when all his lies finally caught up with him. After learning about the pregnancy and Simon's lies about dead relatives, I realized he wasn't just a cheater. He was something much worse, something that scared me in a way I couldn't quite explain. I needed to talk to someone outside of this whole mess, someone who could help me think clearly, so I called Larry, one of my oldest friends, and the only person I trusted with the full truth. "You're planning to expose him at the party?" Larry asked when I explained everything. "That's bold, but you need to make sure you have every angle covered. He's going to try to spin this." We spent hours on the phone going through the plan, making sure our evidence was organized, making sure there were no holes Simon could squeeze through with his lies. Meanwhile, Simon kept texting me like nothing was wrong, sending me links to wedding venues and asking about honeymoon destinations like we were actually going to have a future together. "What do you think about Italy?" He texted one night, and I typed back, "Sounds perfect," while looking at screenshots of him making the same plans with Angelina. His mother had already RSVP'd to the engagement party, her message saying she was so excited to finally celebrate her son settling down with such a wonderful woman. And I thought about how she had no idea who her son really was. I couldn't wait to show her exactly who she raised, to let her see the lies and the manipulation and the women he'd used like we were nothing. The countdown was on, 7 days left, and Simon was about to learn what happens when his lies finally meet reality. Over the next few days, the three of us started meeting regularly, sometimes at the coffee shop and sometimes at Angelina's apartment where we knew Simon would never show up. We shared more stories, compared more notes, and the more we talked, the more I realized that Simon had used the exact same playbook on each of us. It was like he had a manual for manipulation that he just followed step by step. First, he made us feel special, like we were the only ones who truly understood him. Then he slowly started pulling us away from our friends and family, making little comments about how they don't really get us, or they're just jealous of what we have. Angelina told us how Simon convinced her to stop talking to her best friend because he said the friend was toxic and trying to break us up. The nurse said Simon did the same thing with her sister, telling her that her sister was controlling and didn't want her to be happy. And I remembered how Simon had made me feel weird about spending time with my college friends, always having something planned on nights when I was supposed to see them, always needing me for something that seemed more important at the time. "He isolated us," Angelina said during one of our meetings, shaking her head like she still couldn't believe it. "He made sure we had nobody to talk to except him. That way, when things felt off, we had no one to tell us we weren't crazy." I nodded because she was right. Simon had built walls around each of us, keeping us in our own little prisons where he was the only source of love and validation. It was so obvious now that we could see it, so clear when we laid out all his tactics side by side. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I began feeling almost hopeful. Like maybe exposing him would actually free all of us, not just from Simon but from the damage he'd done to our ability to trust ourselves. One afternoon, Angelina and I were sitting on her couch going through old messages, and she pointed at her phone and laughed. "Look at this," she said. "He sent me this text about how he'd never felt so connected to anyone before, and it's word for word what he sent you the same week." I leaned over to look and couldn't help but laugh too. "He didn't even bother changing the words," I said. "He literally copied and pasted his love declarations." "What a lazy liar," Angelina said, and we both cracked up, the kind of laughter that comes from pain, but also from relief. We could see Simon clearly now. We could see how obvious his tricks were, how predictable his patterns had become once you knew what to look for. He wasn't some master manipulator. He was just a guy who found a formula that worked and used it over and over because he was too lazy or too arrogant to think anyone would ever catch on. "We're going to destroy him," Angelina said, still smiling. "And he has no idea it's coming." I smiled back, and for a moment everything felt like it was going to be okay. We had a plan, we had each other, and Simon was walking around thinking he'd gotten away with everything. But then my phone rang. It was the nurse. And when I answered, I could hear immediately that something was wrong. She was crying so hard she could barely get the words out. He came to my apartment, she managed to say between sobs. Simon came to see me. He showed up with flowers and this ultrasound photo he had framed, and he held my face and told me I was everything to him. My heart started pounding. What happened? What did you say? I almost believed him, she cried. I almost forgave everything. He looked at me with those eyes and I forgot all of it. Every lie, every other woman. For a second I thought maybe we were wrong. Maybe there was some explanation we missed. I was already grabbing my keys before she finished talking. Stay where you are, I said. I'm coming over right now. Don't answer the door if he comes back. Don't talk to him. Just wait for me. I told Angelina what happened and we both rushed to the nurse's apartment, breaking probably 5 traffic laws on the way there. When we arrived, she buzzed us up and opened her door looking like she'd been through a war. Her eyes were swollen, her face was blotchy, and she was holding a bouquet of yellow roses in her hands like they were poison, like she wanted to throw them away but couldn't make herself do it. He brought these, she said, her voice small and broken. Yellow roses because he said they reminded him of sunshine, and I'm his sunshine. I gently took the flowers from her hands and set them on the kitchen counter, far away from her. Angelina guided her to the couch and we sat on either side of her, close enough that she could feel she wasn't alone. Tell us what happened, I said softly. Everything. She took a shaky breath and started talking. He just showed up. No warning, no text first. He knocked on my door and when I opened it, he was standing there with the flowers and the framed ultrasound and this look on his face like he was about to cry. He said he couldn't stop thinking about me and the baby, that we were the most important thing in his life, that he'd do anything to make this work. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. And then he held my face in his hands, really gentle, and he looked right into my eyes, and he said, "You're my whole world. I've never loved anyone the way I love you." And I swear, in that moment, I forgot everything. I forgot you two existed. I forgot the screenshots and the other women and all the lies. I just saw the man I fell in love with, the man who was supposed to be the father of my baby, and I wanted so badly for it all to be some terrible mistake. She started crying harder, and Angelina wrapped an arm around her shoulders. What happened next? Angelina asked. I almost let him in, the nurse whispered. I almost told him I forgave him. But then I looked down at my phone on the table and saw our group chat, saw your names, and it was like a bucket of cold water. I told him I needed time to think, and I closed the door. He stood out there knocking for like 20 minutes before he finally left. I felt a chill run through me thinking about Simon standing outside her door, patient and persistent, working his charm like it was a tool he'd used 1,000 times before. Because it was. That's exactly what it was to him. We sat with the nurse for hours, talking her through every lie, every betrayal, every promise Simon had broken. We showed her the screenshots again, not to hurt her but to remind her what was real. We read through the messages where Simon said the exact same things to all 3 of us, word for word, like we were interchangeable. He told you the same thing, I said, pointing to a message on my phone. That you're his sunshine. That you're his whole world. He said it to Angelina too. And he said it to me just last week while he was planning our wedding. These aren't real feelings. They're lines from a script he uses on everyone. The nurse nodded slowly, her tears drying up as the anger started to come back. He's so good at it though, she said. When he looks at you like that, when he says those words, it feels real. It feels like you're the only person who exists. That's what makes him dangerous, Angelina said. He knows exactly how to make you feel special. He's been practicing his whole life. We stayed with her until 3 a.m, ordering pizza and watching bad movies and just being there so she wouldn't be alone with her thoughts. By the time the sun started coming up, the nurse wasn't crying anymore. She was angry again. That cold, determined anger that I'd seen in Angelina's eyes when she first decided to help me. I'm not letting him do this to me again, she said, her hand resting on her belly. I'm not letting him do this to my baby. He's going to pay for everything he's done to all of us. I hugged her goodbye and drove home as the city woke up around me, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen. Simon had almost pulled her back in with nothing but flowers and a smile. No evidence, no explanations, just that charm of his that worked like a spell on anyone who got close to him. I understood now why he'd gotten away with this for so long, why there might be women before us who never found out the truth, or couldn't bring themselves to believe it even when they saw the proof. Simon didn't just lie. He made you want to believe the lie. He made you doubt your own eyes and ears because the alternative was accepting that someone you loved was a monster. The engagement party was in 5 days, and I knew more than ever that we had to do this right. One wrong move, one moment of weakness like what almost happened tonight, and Simon would slip away again, ready to find his next victims. I wasn't going to let that happen. So after watching Simon almost pull the nurse back in with nothing but flowers and a smile, I understood why he'd gotten away with this for so long. I needed perspective from someone who wasn't drowning in the middle of this mess. So I reached out to Barney, an older friend who'd seen me through bad relationships before. We met for coffee and I told him everything, showed him the evidence, explained how Simon had almost convinced the nurse to forget it all. Barney listened carefully, and then said something that made everything click into place. "He's not just lying to you," Barney explained. "He's studying each of you, figuring out exactly what you need to hear, what wounds you have that need filling, and then he becomes that person perfectly. He's not improvising, he's performing." That night, Simon texted me saying he couldn't wait to start our life together, that everything was finally falling into place for us. I stared at those words, knowing he probably sent similar messages to the other women, and typed back, "Me too," with hands that didn't shake anymore. The engagement party was in 5 days, and we'd finalized every detail of the reveal, organized all our evidence into a presentation that would leave no room for his excuses. I couldn't wait to watch his mask finally crack in front of everyone who believed in him. 2 days before the party, I was at Simon's apartment helping him finalize the guest list, when he said something that made my blood run cold. "Oh, I almost forgot," he said casually, not even looking up from his phone. "I might invite a friend from work. She's been having a rough time lately, and I think it would cheer her up to get out and celebrate something happy." I kept my face completely still even though my heart was racing. "A friend from work?" I asked, trying to sound like I was just making conversation. "Yeah, she's a nurse at the hospital near my office. Really sweet girl. She's pregnant, actually, about 5 months along, and her boyfriend just left her, so she's been pretty down." He shook his head like he felt so sorry for this poor woman, and I had to dig my nails into my palms to stop myself from screaming because he was describing the nurse perfectly. The same woman who was carrying his baby. The same woman he'd promised to marry next spring. He was planning to bring her to our engagement party as just some random coworker he felt bad for. "That's really nice of you," I managed to say, and my voice sounded weird even to my own ears, but Simon didn't seem to notice. "You're such a good friend to the people you work with." He smiled at me, that perfect smile that used to make me feel so loved, and said, "I just hate seeing people suffer, you know? I want everyone to be happy." The second I left his apartment, I pulled out my phone and started texting the group chat with shaking hands. "Emergency," I typed. "Simon is planning to invite the nurse to the party as a work friend. He's going to have all 3 of us in the same room." Angelina responded first with a string of curse words that I completely agreed with. Then the nurse called me directly because she said typing wasn't fast enough for how angry she was. "He's going to introduce me as his coworker?" she said, her voice tight with rage. "While I'm carrying his baby? While he told me we're getting married? He's going to play the devoted fiancé to me the whole time," I said. "He probably thinks you don't know I exist, or that you'll be too shy to say anything. He's betting on none of us making a scene." "He has no idea we've been meeting," Angelina added, because I'd put her on speakerphone so we could all talk. "He thinks we're all still in our separate little boxes, completely isolated from each other." We talked for an hour trying to figure out if this changed our plan. In some ways, it actually made things easier, because now we didn't have to find a way to get the nurse into the party without Simon noticing. He was doing that work for us. But it also meant we had to be even more careful about how we acted around him in those final days. If any of us slipped up, if Simon sensed that something was wrong, he might call off the party or come up with some excuse to keep the nurse away. The next day, Angelina called me with news that made everything worse. "I just got off the phone with my cousin who knows Simon's family," she said, and her voice was shaking with anger. "Apparently Simon has been telling everyone that I've been stalking him. He said I'm his ex who can't accept that he moved on, and that I've been sending him crazy messages and showing up at his apartment." "What?" I felt sick all over again. "He's telling his family I'm unstable and obsessive. He said he's been thinking about getting a restraining order, but he feels too bad for me because he knows I'm mentally ill." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Mentally ill. He's been setting this up for months, making sure that if I ever came forward, nobody would believe me. They'd just think I was the crazy ex who couldn't let go." I thought about how Simon had warned Angelina about me before we even met, calling me his crazy ex who made up stories. He'd done the same thing with the nurse, telling her Angelina was his troubled cousin. And now I understood that this wasn't just casual lying. This was a deliberate strategy. Simon had been building escape routes long before any of us caught on to what he was doing. He'd planted seeds with everyone who mattered, everyone who might believe us over him, making sure they'd already heard that we were unstable before we ever had a chance to tell our side. A few hours later, the nurse called me crying again, but this time it was a different kind of crying. It was the kind that comes from being betrayed by the people who are supposed to protect you. "My mom called me today," she said between sobs. "She asked if I was taking my medication. She said Simon reached out to her a few weeks ago because he was worried about me, and told her that I'd been having delusions about being in a relationship with him. I couldn't even respond at first because I was too shocked." "He contacted your parents?" "He told them I had a mental breakdown after we hooked up once, and that I started imagining we were in love, imagining I was pregnant with his baby, all of it. My mom has voicemails saved where she's asking me if I need to see a doctor, if I'm taking care of myself, if I've been having episodes again." Her voice broke completely. "Episodes. Like I'm crazy. like I made all of this up. But you have proof, I said. You have the messages, the photos, the ultrasound appointments he went to with you. My mom doesn't know that. All she knows is what Simon told her, and he was so convincing, so worried about me. She said he sounded like such a nice young man who was just trying to help. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Simon hadn't just been lying to us. He'd been systematically destroying our credibility with anyone who might believe us. He'd gone to Angelina's extended family, to the nurse's parents, probably to other people we didn't even know about yet. He'd been building a wall of doubt around each of us, making sure that when the truth came out, he could point to all these concerned people and say, "See? They've been saying these women are crazy for months. This is just more of the same." I called Angelina and the nurse together for an emergency meeting at Angelina's apartment that night. We sat around her kitchen table with all our evidence spread out in front of us. But for the first time since we started planning, I felt genuinely scared. "He's been preparing for this," I said. "Maybe not specifically for us, but for any woman who might catch on. He has backup plans for his backup plans. If we go in there and make our accusations without perfect proof, he's going to use all of this against us," Angelina said, pointing at her phone where she'd saved screenshots of what his family was saying about her. "His mom already thinks I'm a stalker. The nurse's parents think she's having a breakdown. How long before he starts telling people you're unstable too?" I thought about it and realized he probably already had. How many casual comments had he made to his friends about his intense fiancé who got jealous over nothing? How many seeds had he planted that I never even noticed? "We have to be absolutely perfect," the nurse said, her hand on her belly. "Every piece of evidence has to be undeniable. We need timestamps, we need the messages side by side, we need everything organized so clearly that there's no way he can spin it. And we can't give him any warning," I added. "If he senses something is off, even for a second, he'll find a way to control the narrative. He'll cancel the party or kick one of us out before we can say anything." We spent the rest of the night going over our plan again and again, tightening every detail, making sure there were no holes Simon could squeeze through. The presentation we'd put together had screenshots with dates and times, messages to all three of us that matched word for word, photos he'd sent each of us claiming we were his only one. It was overwhelming when you saw it all together. The sheer volume of lies he'd told, the way he recycled the same romantic gestures and promises like they meant nothing. But now I understood the stakes were even higher than I'd thought. If we made one mistake, if we gave Simon any room to maneuver, he would use everything he'd already set up to make us look like exactly what he'd been telling people we were. Three crazy women who couldn't accept reality, who made up fantasies about a man who was just trying to live his life. The engagement party was in 2 days. Simon was still texting me goodnight, still sending me heart emojis, still acting like we were the perfect couple about to start our perfect life together. He had no idea that the three women he'd manipulated, isolated, and discredited had found each other. He had no idea that we'd seen through every lie, every fake tragedy, every manufactured concern he'd planted with our families. He thought he was the smartest person in the room, the one pulling all the strings while the rest of us danced like puppets. But in 2 days, Simon was going to learn what happens when his puppets cut their strings and start pulling back. So after discovering Simon's backup plans to discredit each of us, I knew our reveal had to be completely airtight. No room for him to wiggle out or spin another story. Larry came over that night and helped me organize all the evidence into a real presentation, something we could show on a screen so everyone could see it at once. We put together screenshots with timestamps showing exactly when Simon sent the same messages to all three of us, matching promises side by side, photos he sent each of us claiming we were his only one. Simon called me that night, the night before the party, and his voice was so soft and sweet when he said he couldn't believe he'd found someone like me, that I was everything he'd ever wanted. I almost felt sick listening to those words because I knew now they were just recycled scripts, lines he'd used on every woman before me and would probably use on whoever came after. His entire family would be there tomorrow, his mom and his brother and all his friends, everyone who thought they knew him, everyone who believed he was this good guy settling down with the woman he loved. The engagement party was about to become something none of them would ever forget. And this is where Simon's perfect story ends. The day of the party arrived and everything looked perfect, exactly how Simon had planned it. With white flowers on every table and soft music playing and fairy lights strung across the ceiling of the venue we'd rented for this special occasion. Simon picked me up that morning wearing his best suit, the one he said he was saving for our wedding day, and he looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "You look amazing," he said, pulling me close and kissing my forehead. "I can't believe I get to spend the rest of my life with you." I smiled and said all the right things back to him, told him he looked handsome, told him I was excited, played the part of the happy bride-to-be, while inside I was counting down the minutes until everything changed. Guests started arriving around 6, Simon's family and friends and coworkers, all of them hugging us and congratulating us and telling us what a beautiful couple we made. Simon's mom was one of the first to show up, wearing a blue dress she said she bought special for the occasion, and she held my hands and told me how happy she was that her son had finally found someone who made him want to settle down. "He's talked about you nonstop," she said, her eyes getting watery. I've never seen him like this with anyone. You're special to him, I can tell. I thanked her and smiled and felt nothing but cold determination underneath it all, because I knew what was coming and she had no idea. Simon worked the room like he always did, shaking hands with the men and charming the women and making everyone feel like they were the most important person there. His hand stayed on my waist most of the night, guiding me from group to group, introducing me as the love of my life and the woman who made me believe in forever, and all those pretty words that I now knew he'd said to at least 2 other women. I kept scanning the room, looking for Angelina, and finally spotted her near the back wearing a catering uniform with her hair pulled up under a cap. Our eyes met for just a second, and she gave me the tiniest nod, letting me know she was in position and everything was ready. The nurse was hiding in a back room, waiting for her cue, probably nervous but definitely ready to finally face the man who had lied to her about everything, including his own family being dead. About halfway through the evening, after everyone had eaten and the champagne was flowing and Simon was glowing with all the attention, I excused myself and made my way to the small stage where the DJ had set up. There was a microphone there and a screen behind it that we'd told Simon was for showing photos of our relationship, cute pictures of us together that his mom had helped put together. Simon saw me heading up there and his face lit up because he thought I was about to say something sweet about him in front of everyone. Everyone, can I have your attention, please? I said into the microphone, and the room quieted down as people turned to look at me. Simon was standing near the front, beaming with pride, probably already composing his own speech in his head about how lucky he was to have found me. I want to make a toast to my wonderful fiancé, I continued, and people raised their glasses, smiling, ready to celebrate. But first, I put together a little slideshow that I think everyone needs to see. It really shows who Simon is as a person. I pressed the button on the remote I was holding and the screen behind me came to life. But instead of photos of Simon and me at the beach or cooking dinner together or any of the sweet moments his mom had collected, the screen showed screenshots, text messages. The first one was a message Simon had sent me 3 months ago saying, "You're my whole world. I've never felt this way about anyone." Right next to it was the exact same message, word for word, that he'd sent to Angelina on the same day. Then another slide showing him calling me his angel in one message and calling someone else his angel in another. Same day, same promises, just different women. The room went completely silent. I watched Simon's mom stare at the screen with her mouth slightly open, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. His friends' faces changed from confusion to something darker as they started reading the messages and putting the pieces together. Simon's brother leaned over and whispered something to his wife, and they both looked at Simon with expressions I couldn't quite read. Simon himself stood frozen for about 3 seconds before his face shifted into damage control mode. His hand dropped from where it had been reaching toward me, and he stepped forward, shaking his head. "That's not real," he said, and his voice cracked just a little bit. "Those are fake. She's crazy. I told you all she's been acting strange lately. This is exactly what I was worried about." He turned to look at his mom, trying to get her on his side. "Mom, you know me. You know I would never do something like this. She made these up because she's jealous and insecure and she needs help." His mom didn't say anything. She just kept staring at the screen where more messages were appearing, more proof of his lies stacking up one after another. That's when Angelina stepped forward from the catering area, pulling off her cap and letting her hair fall down around her shoulders. "Hi, Simon," she said, and her voice carried across the silent room. "Remember me? Your girlfriend of over a year? The one you gave a ring to last month and promised you'd marry someday?" Simon's face went pale, but he tried to recover. "She's my cousin," he said quickly, pointing at Angelina. "She has mental problems. I told everyone about this. She's been stalking me and making up stories." "I have screenshots too," Angelina said, pulling out her phone. "Want me to show everyone the messages you sent me? Because they're exactly the same as the ones you sent her." She pointed at me. "Word for word, Simon. You didn't even bother changing the script." Before Simon could respond, the door to the back room opened and the nurse walked out. She was wearing a simple dress that showed her pregnant belly clearly, 5 months along with Simon's baby, and she walked toward him with her head held high even though I could see her hands shaking at her sides. "And remember me?" she said. "Your fiancé? The mother of your child? The woman you told your whole family was dead so you could pretend to be an orphan who needed saving?" Simon's face drained of all color. He looked like someone had punched him in the gut and he couldn't catch his breath. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit or an ally or something that could save him, but everyone was staring at him with horror and disgust, and he had nowhere to run. I stepped forward and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "These are the other women you promised forever to. The ones you said were crazy exes and troubled cousins and imaginary relationships. They're real, Simon. They're right here. And we all have the proof." The room erupted in whispers as people started talking to each other, as Simon's friends pulled out their phones to look at the screenshots I'd already sent to the group chat we'd made, as his coworkers started putting together all the times he'd told different stories about his personal life. Simon kept shaking his head, kept trying to speak, but no words were coming out. He looked like a computer that had crashed, like his brain couldn't process what was happening because none of his usual lies were working. Then his mother stood up from her chair. The room went quiet again as she walked slowly toward her son, her heels clicking on the floor with each step. She stopped right in front of him and looked at his face for a long moment. Really looked, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "Mom," Simon said, and his voice sounded like a little kid's voice, scared and small. "Mom, you have to believe me. This is all a mistake. These women are lying. They're working together to destroy me." His mother just kept looking at him. Then she said, in a voice that was calm and sad, and somehow worse than if she'd been screaming, "I always knew something was wrong with you. I just didn't want to believe it." Simon's whole body seemed to shrink. His shoulders dropped, his face crumpled, and for the first time since I'd known him, he had absolutely nothing to say. No charm, no excuses, no perfectly crafted lies ready to make everything okay. He just stood there in front of his mother, and the room full of people who used to believe in him, completely exposed, completely defeated. I looked at Angelina and the nurse and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not happiness exactly, because this whole thing was still horrible, and none of us would ever get back the time and trust we'd wasted on Simon. But peace, knowing that we'd done it. We'd cut through his lies and shown everyone exactly who he really was. Simon couldn't hurt any of us anymore. He couldn't spin another story or plant another seed of doubt. The mask was off and everyone could see the empty, selfish person underneath. His brother walked up to him and said, "I vouched for you, man. I told my wife you were a good guy. How could you do this?" Simon didn't answer. One of his friends from work shook his head and walked out of the party without saying anything. Simon's mom sat back down heavily, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore, and his brother's wife went to comfort her while shooting disgusted looks at Simon. The nurse turned to me and Angelina and said quietly, "We did it. It's over." Angelina grabbed both our hands and squeezed, and we stood there together. 3 women who had been strangers before Simon brought us together through his lies, now connected by something stronger than anything he could have understood. Simon finally found his voice, but it came out weak and broken. "Muriel, please," he said, looking at me with those eyes that used to make me melt. "You don't understand. I loved you. I love all of you. I have so much love to give. I couldn't choose." I laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. "That's not love, Simon. That's greed. You didn't love any of us. You loved what we gave you, the attention, the money, the feeling of being special. But you never actually cared about us as people." He opened his mouth to say something else, but his mother cut him off. "Stop," she said, and her voice was sharp now, angry. "Just stop talking. Every word out of your mouth is another lie, and I can't listen to it anymore." She stood up again and walked toward the exit, stopping to look back at Simon one more time. "Don't call me. Don't come to the house. I need time to figure out if I even know who you are." Then she walked out, and Simon's brother followed her, and one by one the guests started leaving, most of them not even looking at Simon as they passed. A few people came up to me and Angelina and the nurse to say they were sorry, to say they had no idea, to ask if we were okay. We said we would be. We weren't okay yet, but we would be, now that Simon couldn't lie to us anymore. By the end of the night, Simon was standing alone in the middle of the venue he'd rented for his engagement party, surrounded by empty chairs and half-eaten food and fairy lights that suddenly seemed sad instead of romantic. He looked small and pathetic, and nothing like the charming man who had swept me off my feet 2 years ago. I walked past him on my way out, and he grabbed my arm, one last desperate attempt to save himself. "Muriel, wait," he said. "We can work this out. I'll change, I promise. I'll be better." I pulled my arm away and looked him in the eyes one final time. "You don't even know what better means," I said. "Goodbye, Simon." And I walked out the door with Angelina and the nurse on either side of me, leaving him alone with the ruins of every lie he'd ever told.